Good morning, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the BSA Client Conversation series. I'm Carol Wedge, the CEO of Shepley Bulfinch, and I'm your host for this series. Client Conversations is held the second Tuesday of every month, and we focused it around quarterly themes, spotlighting clients and their projects, as well as their strategies for managing change and thinking about the future. So this quarter, we're focused on engines of the market. And today we welcome Kathy MacNeil and Nicole Lacina from Millennium Partners Boston. They're going to be sharing the story of their very exciting project, Winthrop Center, which is currently under construction. And so the format for the conversation is going to be that you'll hear a little bit from them, and then we'll have plenty of time for conversation. But first, we want to kind of simulate being together and start with breakout rooms. So for 15 minutes, we're just going to put you in breakout rooms, let you chat with everyone, think about the topic, think about what you're thinking about the city and what the future is and what are the engines of change you're really focusing on and paying attention to. And then we'll bring you back about 8:45 and we'll begin with our presentation and then a rich conversation about Millennium Center, about Winthrop Center. So I think we're ready to go. Patricia, if you want to send us into breakout rooms, and then we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hate when you get muted on entry, so sorry about that. Great to see all of you. Glad that you've joined us for a really interesting conversation this morning. We have a little bit of just housekeeping to do. Some of the guidelines and updates are on the screen right now. And probably the most important one is think about the questions you have for Kathy and Nicole, questions you have about Winthrop Center, and even just, sort of ideating about the future of the city. We'd love to hear from you, love to hear your thoughts. We are recording this session, so if you have kids or something going on in the background that you don't want recorded, feel free to turn off your camera. So we also will be posting the CEU in the chat. So if you want continuing ed, please sign in and follow those directions. That would be terrific. So we have set up the client conversations this year for a couple of reasons. One, to keep us connected, but also to hear how our clients think. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of a barrier between how a client thinks strategically about a project and how a BSA member thinks strategically about a project. And so we want to kind of cross-pollinate and close that gap and really hear from our interesting clients how they're thinking about the future and how they're thinking about strategy. I'll put a plug in for our June 8th session with Onda French and a project that they're doing in Malden called Bay State Commons. So watch for that. We'll get that out on social media, but we'd love you to join us the second Tuesday for the rest of the year. So now I have the great pleasure to introduce our presenters who you'll meet today. Kathy MacNeil is currently the principal at Millennium Partners Boston, the local office of Millennium Partners, and her focus is real estate development and has been for a long time. She's worked on several very complex projects, including Millennium Tower, and Winthrop Center is the project that we'll be hearing about today. Kathy is a LEED accredited professional, has her Massachusetts construction supervisor's license, and she received her Master of Science in Real Estate Development from MIT Center for Real Estate. She also has a bachelor degree from Wentworth in architectural engineering, and she serves on the advisory board for Historic Boston. She's also on the board of directors of the Friends of Post Office Square. Kathy teaches as an adjunct professor at Wentworth in the construction management department, and she serves as a university trustee. She also received the Boston Society of Architects Women in Design Award for Excellence in 2016. So Kathy, we're excited to hear from you today and thank you for joining us. Nicole Lacina is a veteran marketing professional who is Kathy's colleague. Her special expertise is in defining and executing luxury brand strategies, which is a really interesting framework, and love to hear Nicole's thoughts about how to think about residential real estate and interior design. Nicole manages a whole spectrum of marketing services, from complex digital and print production to a sales center design and build out, all focused on brand consistency and promotion. So Nicole currently leads the marketing team at Millennium Partners Boston, with marketing efforts resulting in over $2 billion in real estate sales. So excited to have you with us, Nicole. Nicole holds a BS in Public Relations from the University of Florida and a Master's in Mass Communication from the University of Central Florida. She holds a certificate in interior design from UCLA as well. So Kathy and Nicole, welcome. We're so excited to have you join us. I'm going to turn it over to you, and Nicole's the driver of this engine. So Nicole, get her slides up. And I will monitor the chat for questions along the way. So feel free to put them in at any time. But Kathy and Nicole, thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. All right, so first I wanted to talk a little bit about us, Millennium Partners. We have over 30 years of innovation in real estate development. And I mentioned that because our nationwide experience is really what informed so many of our decisions in the design of Winthrop Center. So you may be familiar, if you are living in the Boston area, you may be familiar with our most recent projects, Millennium Place and Millennium Tower. This one is a little bit different because it is mixed use, but so much of what we learned on the last few projects really informed our decisions on that. So we are considering Winthrop Center the first global Class A office building. And what does that mean? Is it marketing speak a little bit? But what we've learned in so much of our dealings here, the conversations we've had are that nothing else like this exists. And we've basically created a new class. And so we consider that our global Class A. And Kathy's going to talk a little bit about what makes us so special.
So as Nicole mentioned, after 30 years of studying various building types and constructing them and leasing and selling them, that's a lot of collective knowledge that we can apply to this exciting new project in Boston. Global first class means it's global in its sustainability, you know, the largest office passive house building in the world, as far as I know today. We have incorporated health and wellness. We have incorporated LEED, traditional LEED checklist, platinum for the office building and gold for the residential. And in addition to that, it has the standard Class A office components that you would expect, like views, location, accessibility. It's in a great urban place. And it also has some very exciting new tenant amenities that I think a lot of people are looking for. So the building itself has lobbies on the ground floor, a connector space. We'll hear a little bit more about the connector space, but that's a public space. The collective is a full floor of those tenant amenities I mentioned that I think a lot of our employees are going to be looking for when they come back to work. Not if they come back to work, but when they come back to work. 812,000 square feet of office space on floor plates of 38,000. A residential club, which is our amenity club that we've been doing in our residential buildings for the past several projects. And that includes swimming facilities, rooftop lounge, and outdoor terrace. And then residential condominiums. I know there's been some discussion about the project going rental, but we are bullish on the market and we fully expect that we will be able to sell the project out as condominiums. So this is the space that you see being constructed in downtown right now. Just to give you an idea of the floor plate, this is the ground floor. The building is located mid-block between Federal Street and Devonshire Street. One Winthrop is the historic building located on the Devonshire Street, and the Winthrop Square Park is being reimagined as part of our project. Obviously, with a mixed-use building, we want to have separate lobbies, so the residences will have their own address and their own entry, as well as parking facilities. There are 3 levels below grade. Once you enter the parking garage, of course, it's going to be shared because we want to minimize the number of cars being used. And then the office lobby has its own space, and we have this connector space between the two that is meant as a public, quote, connector between Federal Street and Devonshire, also connecting folks from the Greenway and the South Station area into downtown proper. When the city issued the RFP for the project, they had actually asked for a rooftop or a sky observatory. We were not bullish on that. I think security measures and the complications of getting people from the street up into the building didn't really sing with us. But what sang with us was a pedestrian level public space that people could happen upon when they were working or walking along the street, that people could enjoy this ground level space. And quite frankly, with the change in retail and folks not really knowing where the retail sector is going, it's really important to continue to create urban life at the pedestrian level. And that's where, with the help of Blake Middleton and Scott Chisholm and the other folks and partners at Handel Architects, this vision of a public space called the Connector was created. And it's a space that's being designed to accommodate events of up to 350 people. It also has these conference, what we're calling pods. These will be available to the public to rent as well as to tenants in the building. The proper space will be open for lunchtime gathering, for afternoon events. There's opportunities for sponsorship. And in particular, there will be opportunities for people from the entire Boston community to use this as another venue for various events. The Connector, the Collective, which is on the 3rd floor, is a club space that is only available to tenants of the building. And you can see off to the right-hand side, the Winthrop Center Park, which will reinforce the wellness ideas of the building by bringing nature and continuing nature in downtown, which can tend to be a little bit too much of paved space. So we intend to have a lot of landscaping. We want to have a water element that's also sculptural, because we know in New England, you're not always blessed with the weather to continue to run a fountain. The park was designed by Ground Inc. I can tell you a little bit more about Ground, but one of the we selected Ground, because I had not worked with them before, is that it's a woman-owned firm. Shauna Gilly Smith runs the organization. She has a very diverse workspace. And because of our commitment to diversity, which I'll talk about later, we were introduced to Shauna, and it's been a wonderful partnership. We have since been working with Shauna on some other projects. So that's just a little aside of how the diversity piece will fit into all of this.
So because of the civic component, the sheer size of the project, and we knew the impact it would have on Boston, we knew we had to assemble an incredible team of people to help us. And it actually started with some inspiration out of Amsterdam with The Edge. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to watch their segment on Bloomberg. And so we actually went to Amsterdam, and while sitting in a cafe, realized, what are we doing here? We have some of the brightest minds in the world literally across the river from us. And so that led us to Professor John Fernandez with MIT.
I was thrilled when MP Boston came to me with their vision for Winthrop Center. I really wanted to collaborate with them because their vision lined up perfectly with our research into the responsibility the next generation of urban buildings must have to the planet and to the people who are going to work and live there. Winthrop Center will forever change the measurement standard for a sustainable, healthy, and human-centered building. Imagine a set of metrics that aren't isolated from one another, but integrated together, each metric not distinct from, but in relation to the others, to create an entirely new breed of office space, one that goes beyond even the best of today's Class A buildings. It's an exciting prospect.
And so what Professor John taught us was that it really is the intersection of sustainability, technology, wellness, and social engagement that creates a true holistic project, and also just genuinely happier people coming to work every day. And we really hung our hat on that from a marketing perspective. One of the biggest challenges we have, though, is because this is such a complex building and because there's so much to it, And speaking to the average person, and I put myself in that category, we have to explain lots of complex components. And so we actually went to Germany when it relates to Passive House, being the largest Passive House office building in the world. Took my team, took a camera crew, and it wasn't until a train ride actually from Darmstadt to Heidelberg that the penny dropped, I think, for all of us. I think they even had little flashcards for us, trying to teach us about the inner workings of Passive House. And our biggest takeaway was, if you build a better building, you use less energy. And that's something we constantly try and reinforce to our clients, is that it's all about putting in the effort, the energy, the investment up front for the energy savings on the back end. So while Passive House addresses the building envelope, Well Gold is what affects the human. Everything, every decision that we make for the occupant wellness was really informed by this WELL standard. And so that's anything from access to healthy foods and fitness, to fresh air, to light, informed a lot of our decisions here. Also, a very well-timed book, The 9 Foundations of a Healthy Building, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, is something we actually offer. We offer copies of to our clients. We have a physical library here of books and research that we can offer to people if they want to sort of get into the weeds on this. But we try and explain that it's really the intersection of all of these 9 foundations that creates this environment that people want to come to work to every day. So that we created, again, trying to keep this simple and understandable, talking about, we gave some examples of how we categorize each of these 9 foundations and what Winthrop Center has to offer. And now Kathy's going to talk a little bit about the office interior.
So the floor plates for the office space, 38,000 square feet. And I think many of the architects on the call this morning are probably looking at this floor plate and saying, that's a little different for an office building. We're used to elliptical or rectangular or space that is more rigid, following the 5-foot office grid. But in fact, the T-shaped office space allowed us a lot of advantage. Much more access to the perimeter, which allows us much more access to natural light. The connector runs through here, which means structurally, the building was set up to allow this very large 50-foot column-free pathway. These 2 gray areas that you see are designed for 2-height space. So those are knockout slabs that are going to make it much easier day 1 and also day, 4 or 5 years, 10 years from now, for a tenant coming into the building to be able to connect 2 floors. One thing I've learned in my real estate career is that once we build these buildings, they're here for a long, long time, hundreds of years. So I feel a responsibility to make sure that we are designing for the long haul. That's part of the Passive House conversation that we had as an organization, as well as all the other attributes that we're designing for the future. The cores have been separated. So again, it allows this through light area. Every office floor has an outdoor terrace because it's part of our commitment to providing a healthy workplace for folks. We have 3 stairwells in the building. That was designed pre-pandemic when people were thinking about benching, and we were designing the floor plate to hold a lot of folks. That may change as we go forward. So all very interesting, but I think the point is that this building was designed as an engine of change, and it's going to last for many, many years to come and be flexible. And that's what we're seeing the tenants in the marketplace are looking for today, is that flexibility, because nobody knows where things are going, but they do know their employees want to come back to a healthier environment. And to that point, we definitely have a healthy environment in our collective space, which is amenity space for tenants only that includes fitness centers, places to meet, places to have learning. There's learning steps, there's a library, there's a sports simulator where you can, check out your golf game on a rainy day, but also a place where people can connect as a community. So you may be working alone up in your apartment upstairs and want to come down here. You may be a tenant who wants to interact with a law firm in the building. So it's a wonderful space to get to know each other and to share that community that I think the past year, many of us have come to realize how valuable that is. I do see some questions coming up, and I'll just finish and then we can jump over to the questions that are in the chat. We can't talk about engines for change in real estate without talking about the last several years where finally social impact, diversity, and inclusion have become part of the real estate vocabulary. Winthrop Center was one of the first major projects going through Article 80 that volunteered for the new workforce goals. We had filed our project notification early enough that we didn't have to do that, but we chose to do that. We also extended those goals into our design and our professional services. And on the back end, we're committed to have the building continue to operate with an emphasis on giving work to folks that are in underrepresented minority groups, as well as women-owned, minority, and disadvantaged businesses. And to that point, Millennium Partners, who typically, we have our team. I know a lot of people have been frustrated. They've tried to break in. We've done all of our buildings in Boston with Handel. But the inclusionary goals for this project allowed us to meet some great folks. We worked early on with Dream Collaborative. They really helped us through the Article 80 process. It was a pleasure getting to know their team. They will now be somebody that we work with going forward. I mentioned Ground Inc. as a landscape firm, another new player in our team that we've enjoyed working with. I've met several construction companies. We've done a mentoring program with Bill Moran out in the neighborhood. So we have had the real advantage of being able to push diversity, to set up pipeline, and to really be an engine of change in the way real estate will be done going forward to provide more opportunities. And in closing, although there's always more to talk about, the building itself, if you haven't been downtown, is well under construction. We'll be completing the project at the end of 2022, and it will provide a new vision for our skyline in Boston. And I noticed Todd Lee is in the audience, and I will commend him for pushing us to do a very well done, what we anticipate to be a great crown lighting on this building, which the skyline can certainly always enjoy in the city of Boston. So thank you. I think we'll turn it back to Carol and we can open it up to questions.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So Kathy, there are a few questions right out of the gate about how you used well and Passive House and sort of develop that strategy. And maybe that's also linked to how you got to know John Fernandez, how he inspired you, sort of what new lines of thinking he opened up for you. So specifically, the questions are, how are you marketing the Passive House features? I think that's a kind of Nicole question. Do you predict lower operating costs for tenants?
Okay, yeah. Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so as I mentioned, this was a concept that we struggled with in the beginning because LEED has sort of become the unofficial standard, something that they understand, they come in and they know the classification that they're looking for. And it really was our job to break it down to its simplest form and explain that this is beyond. And that's part of what inspired our tagline, right? Is thinking beyond. So this is beyond LEED. While we do, continue to use some of that system in our design, it was, even talking about our trip to Germany and explaining that we've basically built a giant thermos, and what's inside stays, if it's cold, it stays cold, and if it's hot, it stays hot. And there are ways that we can break it down like that. And the fact that we are the largest passive house office building in the world is something we do not take lightly. That is a very big undertaking, something that even the Passive House Institute expressed incredible gratitude that we would even take this on. It's never been done at this scale and in an environment, in a climate as extreme as Boston. So we definitely expect that there will be some energy savings. I'll let Kathy talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Kathy, the well versus passive house and why you did one or emphasize some aspects in the office space versus the residential. Can you just talk a little bit more granular detail about that?
Yeah, I did notice that someone asked why we didn't continue the passive house into the housing. And I think Nicole just hit it on the head. 3 years ago, when we were thinking about this project and designing it, it was still an unknown. We needed to educate ourselves quite a bit. I got it.
Kathy just muted herself by accident.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So hedging our bets and really giving ourselves the opportunity to fully understand passive house, we wanted to focus on the lower portion of the building and give ourselves the ability to do it well and to do it right. So taking on 1.5 million square feet was a little bit more than we were ready to do. In addition, passive house does require you to think about how much glazing you have, and selling views is a very important part of condominium sales in the city of Boston. So that's the honest truth answer, you know.
Yeah. Well, and also right. It has, if you're an engine of the market, you have to meet the market, right? So, and it also seems like you foreground well as a very strong aspect of the living component of the residential component with the club that you've designed and some of the things you talked about. Can you talk about, you know, sort of how you profile who these clients are? How do you read the market for what balance of sustainability, public space you think people are really looking for?
Yeah, so I'll comment on that, because there was also a question about, are you emphasizing well over passive house in marketing? We're not really emphasizing one or the other. We're not emphasizing passive house versus lead versus well. What we're trying to educate the marketplace is that integrating all of these very important aspects and all of these contributing sustainability pieces is what's going to make these projects be able to become sustainable into the future. As I mentioned, we're not just building for the next 10 years, we're building for hundreds of years. So you have to constantly think about how can you integrate all of these tools to make a better building, and then educate the users and provide opportunities for the users to be able to use fitness components. There's a Connect IQ app that'll go with the building, and that may tell you how many, you know, how much carbon you're using. That may tell you how much exercise you did today or what you might need in order to meet your goals. So it's an entire lifestyle, and that will apply to both the housing and the workforce pieces of the building.
So there are more questions about passive house. I'm gonna steer us, because I know there's a lot of information on that, and we could also follow up on that. And I think there's more. I think you mentioned to me there's a lot more there, so we could put a pin, and maybe we have you share more of that with us afterwards, and we can put on the website at the DSA to share that with our users. I wondered if you talk a little bit about, you know, as you think about engine of change, and I've heard you talk about, you know, Millennium Partners really trying to think as differently as possible and as progressively as possible, and all that you've talked around diversity and equity. You know, where do those motivations come from? Is that a company-wide vision? You know, how are you paying attention to the things that will create a more vibrant city in the future? And can you just talk a little bit about your philosophy?
Nicole, you want to take that on?
Sure. I think it is ingrained in all of us. I think even when you start, I started at Millennium, gosh, 17 years ago now. It is so much a part of our culture, is constantly pushing ourselves. And we always joke that even we're a small team, but we're a mighty team. And it's really bringing together some really great minds and pushing each other, right? The fact that even Kathy and I are sitting next to each other at a table, you probably don't see in a lot of development firms, is that head of construction and a marketing director, and the fact that we work together and we push each other. And I love that about working for Millennium. And I think that you can see that in so many of our projects is the fact that we continue to push the envelope and each other and our partners. And
we're not just building a building.
Yeah.
We know we're part of a bigger community. And, Nicole shares her vision. We talk about it as a company. Brad Mahoney's on the site right now today, and he's working very, very diligently on all the sustainability aspects. Madison Nery's on. She just got her Passive House certification. So we as an organization are not linear. We're more integrated. And I think that follows through into our projects. My Suffolk construction team, they have come to the marketing center to see what it is we're selling, because they better be building what I'm selling.
It's all connected. It's all connected. Yeah. So Kathy, if you were to inspire other developers, what are the things that you would, you look at the market and I think, Millennium is different than maybe some other, sort of examples in other cities around the country. What are the things you're hoping the next 10 years of development bring to cities as we come back from the craziest chapter of pandemic in our lives? What are the things you're hoping other developers are learning from you as an engine?
Well, like LEED became important and for tenants and the marketplace to be educated on, I'm hoping that Passive House, or the attributes of Passive House, and sustainability become normalized. In other words, we are paying a premium to construct Winthrop Center. That premium will go away because it will become natural to think about carbon emissions, to think through sustainability in all of these projects. Second, I would like us not to be having a diversity conversation, because it will just be a matter of business. The city is diverse. Its real estate should reflect that. I'm hoping that our work pipelining some of the neighborhoods and educating them about what real estate development is all about will help. And there's a whole nother class we could have on that, because we've done a lot of very little things, but little things are the only way we can kind of move forward. And I also hope that, I do know that our cities will continue to be a great place where people want to be, because people want to be connected. So I look forward to continuing to, plant trees and continuing to get green space and to build these buildings, knowing that they're for future generations.
Yeah, and they're contributing to a larger idea of the city. I feel like there's an aspect of the connector and this idea of social engagement and a different kind of public space. I'd love you to just talk a little bit more about. Feels like there's so many ideas embedded in that. And could you just elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe it's Nicole to start.
Yeah. So it was actually a study that we did on our existing project at Millennium Tower, Boston, that Professor John Fernandez and his team conducted. This is years ago. And I touched on it briefly in the presentation, but essentially social engagement is in his mind just as important as some of the technology and sustainability wellness elements that we're putting into the building, that people genuinely need that as part of their overall well-being. And so when we literally have a white paper on it that proves that these social programs, our LB program that we have as part of our residential component at Millennium Tower, that we really needed to think about how we could put that into Winthrop Center. And now we're inviting the public in, whereas it's very much a private social program at Millennium Tower, that now we have this incredible ground level civic space, and how do we engage the public, and how do we make social engagement part of the conversation. And so many of the design decisions that were made, even putting in AV equipment and ways that we could host, whether it's a gala event or some sort of performance, and host a variety of groups from all over the city. And that was so much of even our initial proposal when the original RFP came out. But now we really are, it's built. So if you're downtown the next time, definitely have a walk by the site. You will see the sheer size of the connector. And we're really excited about the opportunities that it'll have, not only for us, but for everyone really.
Well, and I drove by the site a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that struck me was how many partnerships you can facilitate, and I think of Boston as this interesting blend of real estate development and anchor institutions and anchor academics, and just even hearing about your connection to MIT and how you learn more progressively. But it just seems like an incredible opportunity to create this partnership and engagement about what creates the city, not what divides us, but what connects us, and how do we see these merging. So I think there's exciting opportunities within the connector to think about what could that future be? What is that programming? How do people partner with great ideas for what that space will be?
Yeah, we actually envision that the space will be organized and run by kind of a board of advisors, because we're very committed to make sure that nonprofits get an opportunity, that folks outside of the immediate downtown, one of the things we want to do is connect all of Boston. So we want to make sure that, we have an opportunity for the entire Boston community to use that connector. And to best do that, we think we would engage folks outside of our own organization to help us achieve that.
That's great. That's great. I love that concept. I love that idea. Of course, since we have BSA members, people are asking very technical, specific questions, yeah. So I don't want to ignore them. So a couple points, just so that the business, the business diagram of development, where you're being asked, are you anticipating that you're going to get higher rents, or there will be premiums for people paying for passive house? Are there ways that you thought about that differently in the market, or anything you can comment about sort of just the business model of investing in a more expensive building, definitely having a premium for your building?
Yeah, so we definitely have invested in a more robust facade. Right now, the tenant market is interesting. People are trying to understand how their workforce is going to come back. They definitely appreciate that this global Class A provides their employees what their employees are asking for. Tenants now understand human capital, how valuable it is, how expensive it is if they have a lot of turnover. So the conversation is perfect for Winthrop Center. What's unclear is how much space people want. Are they going to be hoteling? Are they going to be a work from home model? So we're getting a lot of requests from tenants to have flexibility. And luckily we are able to grant that flexibility. I haven't seen us driving rents with the passive house model yet. I think that could almost be second generation, just because of where the market is today. So we are educating people that they are going to have an advantage. There was an earlier question about will tenants save money on their operating costs? Absolutely. We are looking at triple net leases as opposed to gross leases, so the tenants can control those operating costs themselves. We have a lot of measurement verification methods in the building. So all of these will allow tenants to actually understand that this building will be less costly to be in. But having that conversation in today's market, more priority for tenants is the flexibility and how healthy the building is. So it'll be left to be seen what the payoff will be for the investment we made in passive house, but there will be a payoff.
Yeah, and it's a huge differentiator. And I think, many conversations, even the breakout room conversation I was in, is comparing notes on how everyone's thinking about the future. And I think, it's diverse and it's gradual, but it's also, there's some incredible opportunities to think differently. And I feel like Millennium prides itself on thinking differently. So, I think we'll be interested in following how you think about measuring passive house and reporting the metrics as you go forward, and what you learn from measuring the performance of the building and sharing that both with the tenants, but with the community. I think we're always anxious to learn from folks who are leading the way in many ways.
And as Kathy mentioned, our Connects IQ app will have a carbon footprint calculator that is currently in development, which is really exciting. So we will, everyone, all occupants of the building will be able to be updated on its performance.
That's exciting, really exciting. There is another question, very detailed question, but are you buying alternative power to complement or just push the project towards zero? Or how are you thinking about offsite energy sources versus the grid of Metro Boston?
We're still looking at that. So we're a couple of years out yet. So right now we don't have any purchase recs in place.
But something you're thinking about or considering. I mean, I also feel like each project you can only, carve off so much as a way of thinking about it. So being a 65% reduction in energy use is huge. And I think people will want to learn more and more about how that performed, what the lessons learned were. I feel like there's always that back to the future. If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently? Because it looks like you were actively learning and researching at the same time you were putting the project together. So very exciting to see that energy and inquisitiveness and interest in what is the future and what are all the different aspects of the future. We're going to have a few more minutes. We're going to go until like close to 9:45. So if folks have other questions, please put them in the chat. I want to just, before we leave, have each of you share a little bit about your own personal story. Like what brought you to, sort of leading this incredibly complex building, ambitious goals for equity and diversity and energy and sustainability. Kathy, can you just talk a little bit about the trajectory and, what were the things that were signs to you that this was how you wanted to make your career?
I think Nicole mentioned it in the beginning. After 30 years of doing these fairly complex, large projects, we pulled it all together with Winthrop Center. And we really wanted to make a difference, both sustainability-wise, health-wise, architecturally. So when you're able to take that collective knowledge and, quote, think beyond, it really started to resonate with us that that's what we wanted to do. Also, from a practical standpoint, this was a competition in a time when development was fiercely competitive. There were 7 or 8 proposals that competed with us for this site. We needed to be a differentiator, and we knew we could do it. Some folks may sign up for things. We signed up for things knowing that it wouldn't be easy, but that we were up for the challenge, and we had, either we had the right team or we went about, as Nicole mentioned, we found John Fernandez. We went about building the right team. And that's key anytime you're going to undertake one of these challenges. But it was a competitive site, and we wanted it, and we wanted to continue our work in this particular neighborhood of downtown.
That's great. That's great. Nicole, do you want to share a little bit about just your path of, sort of how you ended up leading this remarkable marketing and sort of development campaign around brand, and just share a little bit about your perspective and pathway?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I studied marketing, and my very first job was at an ad agency in Miami, and my very first client was Millennium Partners. So that was a long time ago. But what I will mention is anyone who's worked in industries outside of real estate, that real estate really is its own animal. There is no other industry like it, especially from a marketing perspective. And I think it's one of those sink or swim, right? You're put on a real estate account and you're either going to last a week or you're not. And so it's that became my singular focus. And I ended up moving over to the client side 8 years later. And I've never looked back. So I think it's certainly not for everyone. It's very fast moving. It can be very stressful, but there is nothing I think more exciting. And it's taken me all over the country. So I ended up here in Boston. I'm originally from Miami. And so, and yeah, to be a part of, like Kathy said, to be a part of these projects that, will live on forever, that you can point to your grandkids and say, I helped develop that is really special.
That's great. That's great. I think you're speaking to the choir with a lot of BSA members. Why do people choose to make their life making buildings? It is about designing the city and imagining the city in the future and where it can go. We do have a couple more technical questions. And I don't know, actually, I think someone from Handle Architects is helping answer them for you. You might want to have them speak. But there's a question about the curtain wall, the triple glazing, or the thermos, as Nicole referred to it.
Yeah, I do want to comment on a couple of these questions. First, the 100% electric. So very interesting and really an evolution. When we talked about not doing passive house in the residential, one of the concerns at the time was gas cooking, gas fireplaces, something we had traditionally done. Interestingly enough, as we've developed the project, we have gotten away from gas because of its non-sustainability or its carbon footprint. So electric fireplaces is now what we're doing. And we tested various fireplaces, and we found one that we find is of good quality and really super nice looking. So we've gotten away from gas fireplaces, and then that led us to, well, why are we really doing gas cooking? And we looked at induction cooking, and we fell in love with that. So now we're doing induction cooking and no more gas cooking. The building does still have gas for its heat and hot water. So it'd be nice to move away from that. I don't know if we'll be able to achieve it in this cycle, but we're very conscious of that whole conversation. And then on the curtain wall, triple glazing in the thermos. So triple glazing is not really a new concept, right? We've all done triple glazing. It does make the curtain wall a little bit heavier and more robust. It also has the benefit of providing acoustical benefits to the office workers, which I think is a real plus in today's noisy environment. And the thermos, it's really, really important to study a thermal breaks, which is kind of a basic principle of facade work anyway, but now you have extra attention and extra eyes on it. The other piece to passive house is you're testing as you go. So you have to do a blow a door test every couple of floors or every floor. And that will allow us to, in essence, test the exterior envelope for any leaks. So in a way, we're getting a lot of extra quality control before the building opens, knowing that that facade is doing what it should be doing. And finally, that 65% energy savings is actually measurable. The city of Austin requires buildings, commercial buildings, to report their energy. So we use those metrics when we were comparing Winthrop Center. So we're comparing it to our sister buildings throughout downtown. And we will benefit from the robustness of the Winthrop Center facade. So I think,
I think you did get all of them, which is amazing, Nicole, I just wanted to go a little bit to the app, because I think the idea that people would start to better understand their carbon footprint, I would say the structural engineers have been talking about embodied carbon a little longer than architects. And I think that conversation is becoming more robust, but can you just talk about where that idea came from and how you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it was actually, so we've traditionally done your typical residential building app. You can request your car from valet. You can, you get a notification when your dry cleaning's ready to pick up. And we thought, well, of course, we need to do something now that we're incorporating potentially up to 5,000 office workers and even opening this up to the public. What could we do that really takes this to the next level? And that was actually something that John Fernandez, it was, one of those moments where wouldn't it be cool if, so we had one of those moments several months ago and found a company out of India. So we're building now a totally custom app, and it'll have all of the usual things like, as I mentioned, being able to request your car for valet, you can order your lunch and the very, very basic things. But we really wanted to think beyond in this case and incorporate this carbon footprint calculator that's currently in development.
Yeah, and there's a question about a preliminary pro forma talking about the cycles we're in versus a long-term pro forma. And maybe Kathy, I think you've kind of answered that, but like building for the long term, realizing this is a building that you'll, you're contributing to the city for hundreds of years. Can you talk a little bit about just being in that model, that business model, of the developer mindset of how you navigate different cycles and think both realistically in the near term, but also think in the long term as well.
Yeah, so with an office building that we intend to maintain ownership, condominiums you build and you sell, so you don't get the benefit of any upside or you don't get the benefit of any value creation over time. In the office building, we fully expect that we will get the value over time as tenants renew their leases, as they make that decision, as they find their employees are happy to be here, then they're going to want to stay at Winthrop Center, or there's going to be a demand to come to Winthrop Center. Because even though the cost of passive house is going down, as Scott Chisholm mentioned, construction costs are not going down. So the next person who builds is going to need more dollars in their rent to support their building than I need in my building. So we will only become more competitive, I guess is my point. So yes, we always look at a short-term pro forma, what do we need to pay down the construction loan and then refinance it? And that all depends on lots of factors in the marketplace besides just what the tenants are doing. It's impacted by what's the Treasury doing, what are long-term interest rates. But when you're thinking about the building as something that you're going to hold as an organization, you can think very differently than if you're just building and selling. So I'm not sure that completely answered John Paul's question, but it is, we do think differently. And I think most real estate developers do, depending what the product is and what the exit strategy is.
Yeah, and different regions of the country, different cities, different markets all sort of play into that. As we only have a couple more minutes, I also wanted to give a chance to just, plant some seeds with the BSA members. And we talked a little bit about bringing the city back and sort of its time and what's next. And, just sort of how you would love to see the BSA members participate in, shepherding these big ideas about the city and the future of the city. Is there anything you would, want to share, poke people, encourage people to think about and engage in the next couple of months as we start to reconstruct what being back means?
Well, I personally would love to see all the architects and engineers and the contractors out there that have tenants, send them along, come to our Discovery Center, contact Nicole or I, make an appointment. We'd love to show you our Discovery Center because we think the more people that understand this building, one, the more people copy it, and that's not a bad thing. And two, we do have 812,000 square feet of space at least.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of learning and seeing it inspires other people to imitate it or build on your success. And so you're a model and inspiration for that. Nicole, do you want to answer that question? If you want to speak to the BSA members, what would you love them to know?
Come back to work. We miss you. We've been here downtown all by ourselves. No, every day downtown Boston starts to feel just a little bit better. We're actually our marketing team is partnering with the Downtown Boston Bid, helping them with their marketing. They're actually around town. If you are downtown, they are shooting a new campaign with the tagline that it's time. And it's time to start coming back downtown, whether it's for work or for weekends and shopping. And we really want to echo that sentiment that we're just excited that every day it feels a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'm sure long about fall we'll tap you for, whether coming to the Discovery Center or do some hard hat tours or something to really help people, begin. I think all the BSA members are visual learners, and I love to go to a construction site and see how it's really coming together. So we'll plant that seed for a future invite for some hard hat tours for BSA members. But we just want to thank you so much for your generosity and your time and putting together a great presentation. I think we've learned a lot. I know you're inspiring a lot of the BSA members to think about how far they're pushing their sustainability, and can we begin to think more holistically in an integrated way about how these projects advance equity, diversity, sustainability in our community. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Your feedback's important. There's some housekeeping up on the screen. Please stay up to date with client conversations. Next month, we do have French and a very interesting co-housing project that she'll be sharing with us. So please join us next month. And again, a round of applause for Kathy and Nicole. So fun to learn from you and so exciting to learn more about the ambitious project that's Winthrop Center. So take care, everyone. We want to thank our partners. We're excited that SMPS and NESE are both supporting the BSA, particularly through a crazy year, but also supporting these client conversations. So great to be with you this morning. Again, Kathy and Nicole, thank you so much. It was terrific to hear your story and really be inspired. So everyone have a wonderful day, wonderful week, and we'll see you next month. Take care.